I want to ask you, learner, to do something that might feel just a little bit uncomfortable right out of the gate.
Oh boy, starting strong.
Yeah, well, we have to. So I want you to imagine a highly specific, deeply frustrating scenario.
Okay, lay it on us.
So you're sitting across a table from someone, maybe it's like a close friend or maybe a coworker, and they ask you a super simple everyday question, something totally mundane, like, what did you have for dinner last night? Or what was the name of that movie we saw on Friday?
Right, something that shouldn't take any real brain power at all.
Exactly.
Yep.
And in your mind's eye, you know the exact answer. The information is perfectly intact right there in your head. You can vividly picture the pepperoni pizza you ate, or you could literally see the movie poster with the lead actor's face.
The data is just sitting right there.
The data is there. But when you go to open your mouth and actually speak the words, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Your brain suddenly needs like 5, maybe 10 agonizingly long seconds to actually formulate the words and send them to your vocal cords.
And, in the rhythm of a normal, casual conversation, a 10-second pause is an absolute eternity.
It really is.
The silence just hangs in the air.
It totally does. Count it out in your head. 1, 2, 3.
And the person across the table is just staring at you.
Right. 4, 5. And you can see their expression shift, right? From expectant to just confused.
Yeah, probably wondering if you even heard them.
Exactly. 6, 7, maybe they slowly repeat the question. 8, 9, and now the internal panic sets in.
Your heart starts beating a little faster.
Yes. Because you are perfectly intelligent, you have the answer. But there is this physical, impenetrable delay between your brain retrieving the information and your mouth actually delivering it.
It's a terrifying feeling, honestly.
It really is. And learner, this deep dive was custom tailored for you because you actually asked us to look into this exact phenomenon. We are stepping inside what McMillion calls the brain hole.
Right, from the traumatic brain grinding series.
Yes, exactly. And our mission today is to truly understand the human side of the brain. Specifically, we are looking at the realities of the slow brain following a traumatic brain injury or a TBI.
And it is so important to establish the ground rules for how we approach this material.
Definitely.
Because this isn't, an academic lecture or some detached clinical overview. We do have some serious neuroscience to cover, yes. But the whole purpose is to bridge that massive gap between the everyday lived experience of a survivor and the underlying brain science.
Right, we have to balance the biology with, compassion and practical understanding.
Because this invisible lag affects millions of people. Millions. Yet it remains profoundly misunderstood by the general public, by employers, and this is the heartbreaking part, sometimes even by families.
Yeah, that is heartbreaking. And the core premise that anchors McMillion's work and learner, if you take literally nothing else away from our conversation today, please hold on to this one thing.
It's the most crucial point.
It is. Slower thinking does not equal lower intelligence.
Slower thinking does not equal lower intelligence.
Exactly. As a society, we have this deeply ingrained, almost reflexive assumption that a quick answer is a smart answer.
Oh, absolutely.
And conversely, we assume a delayed answer indicates confusion or, worse, a lack of intellect. And we have to completely dismantle that assumption today. We need to structurally separate a person's core intellect from their brain's processing speed.
It is incredibly telling how universally we conflate speed with ability, isn't it? Look at the structures we build to measure intellect.
School systems, right?
Exactly. Timed standardized testing, Jeopardy-style quiz shows, high-pressure corporate interviews. We culturally reward the fastest hand in the air.
We really do.
But from a strictly neurological standpoint, processing speed is simply a performance barrier. It's just a metric of how fast the system's hardware runs. It is absolutely not a measure of the data contained within the software.
Okay, wait, I love that distinction. Hardware versus software.
Right. Following a traumatic brain injury, a survivor often retains their entire original knowledge base. Their creativity is still there. Their sense of humor is totally intact.
That's huge to remember.
It is. And their procedural skills, like, knowing the physical mechanics of riding a bike or playing a guitar or analyzing a really complex financial spreadsheet, all of that software is preserved.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like a computer setup.
Okay, yeah, go with that.
Imagine you have a desktop computer sitting in your office, learner. And this machine is like top of the line. It has a state-of-the-art processor, terabytes of storage, the most sophisticated software money can literally buy. It is a genius machine.
Sounds expensive.
Oh, very expensive. But The only way it can connect to the internet is through a terrible, frayed 1990s dial-up cable.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the dial-up tones are playing in my head right now.
Right, error. So if you try to download a high-definition movie or even just send a large email, it is going to take hours, maybe even days.
But if you were sitting there waiting for that file to download, you wouldn't say the computer itself was stupid, would you?
No,
Or that the hard drive had suddenly forgotten how to store files.
exactly.
Yeah.
The computer isn't failing because it lacks intellectual capacity. It's struggling to execute the task because the physical cables connecting it to the network are compromised.
Right, the bandwidth just isn't there to carry the data.
Yeah. So for a TBI survivor, the issue is purely the mechanical time required to receive sensory information, organize it in the brain, and physically formulate a response. The intelligence is the supercomputer. The processing speed is that frayed dial-up connection.
That is a brilliant way to put it. When you look at the larger architecture of brain function, long-term memory retrieval and complex problem-solving rely on entirely different mechanisms than raw processing, Steve.
Oh, really? They're totally separate systems.
No, mostly yes. After a severe impact, the brain's overall baseline efficiency is what gets shattered. The brain is forced to expend an immense, almost unfathomable amount of extra effort to reach the exact same intellectual result it used to arrive at, effortlessly.
Wow.
It's not that the survivor is incapable of figuring out the answer to a complex problem, it's that the physical neural pathways required to shuttle that information back and forth have been disrupted. The brain is basically working overtime just to get the signal across the gap.
But wait, I want to pause here for a second because I think it's really easy to intellectualize this and completely miss the human cost.
Yeah, the emotional toll is massive.
It has to be. What does that actually do to a person emotionally? If you know you're smart and you know you have the answer, but you are physically trapped behind that slow dial-up connection while your mind is just racing. That sounds like a special kind of hell.
It really is.
You're forced to sit there and watch people you respect treat you as if you're confused. Or worse, treat you condescendingly, simply because your vocal response is paused.
It's infantilizing.
Exactly. If society equates your speed with your competence, trying to reintegrate into a fast-paced workplace or even just a dynamic social circle must be soul-crushing.
It creates a profound sense of isolation.
Yeah.
And it stems directly from the invisibility of the injury, right? Which naturally leads us to the physical reality of what is actually happening inside the skull.
Okay, let's get into that. If the core intelligence is preserved, what physically constitutes that bad dial-up cable in the human brain?
To understand the lag, we have to look at the anatomy of the brain's communication network. Specifically, we need to talk about white matter.
Okay, anatomically, what are we looking at here? Because when most of us picture a brain, learner included, I'm sure, we picture that wrinkly, walnut-like gray surface.
Right, and that surface layer is the gray matter. You can think of gray matter as the processing centers, the actual computers doing the thinking, storing the memories, making the decisions.
Okay, gray matter is the computers.
Yes. But underneath that gray cortex is a vast, vast network of white matter. If the gray matter is the computers, the white matter is the high-speed fiber optic cabling connecting all those computers together.
So the white matter is the infrastructure.
Precisely. The white matter is primarily made up of millions of axons.
Axons.
Right. An axon is essentially a long microscopic wire extending from a brain cell or neuron, allowing it to fire an electrical signal to another neuron in a totally different part of the brain.
And why is it white?
Good question. It appears white because these tiny wires are wrapped in a fatty protective substance called myelin.
Myelin, okay.
Myelin acts exactly like the rubber insulation on a copper electrical cord. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking out, which ensures that the impulse travels incredibly fast and precisely to its target.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So what happens to that beautifully insulated wiring during a traumatic brain injury? Like a car crash, for example.
Well, to understand the damage, you have to understand the physics of the brain itself. The human brain has the consistency of firm gelatin, or like tofu.
Oh, okay, gross but helpful.
Right, it's very soft. And it is sitting completely untethered inside a hard, bony skull, floating in a thin layer of cerebrospinal fluid.
So it's not strapped down in there?
Not at all. So when a high-speed impact occurs, say a car hits a wall at 50 miles an hour, the skull stops abruptly, but the gelatinous brain keeps moving forward. Then it violently slams back and often twists.
Oh, wow. So it's not just hitting the front and back of the skull, it's physically contorting.
Yes, the rotational force is often the most destructive element. This violent twisting causes something known as diffuse axonal injury, or DAI.
Diffuse axonal injury.
Exactly. The sheer force of the gelatinous tissue twisting inside the skull literally stretches, warps, and sometimes shears those delicate axons.
And shears them, like tears them apart.
Yes. The microscopic high-speed cabling is torn, the myelin insulation is stripped away, or the wire itself is just completely severed. So now, when the gray matter tries to send a signal like, say the word pizza, that electrical signal hits a dead end, or it leaks out into the surrounding tissue because the insulation is gone.
You know, it's exactly like a daily commute.
How so?
Well, if the main multi-lane highway you take to work is suddenly destroyed by an earthquake, you can still physically get to your office, right?
Sure.
The destination hasn't moved, and you certainly haven't forgotten where you work or how to drive a car.
Yeah.
But now, the highway is closed.
Yeah.
You are forced to take the side streets.
Oh, I see where you're going.
And taking the side streets is a nightmare. There are stop signs every single block, there are school zones, there's unpredictable traffic. It's confusing and requires constant active navigation. You eventually arrive at the office, but a trip that used to take 20 minutes now takes an hour and a half.
That is the absolute perfect architectural equivalent of what the brain is doing. When the main axon pathway is sheared by DAI, the brain is incredibly resilient.
It tries to fix itself.
Yes. It will attempt to reroute the electrical signal around the microscopic tears, finding secondary healthy pathways to deliver the message.
The side streets.
Exactly. But forcing an electrical signal to take a convoluted, indirect path of unoptimized neurons creates a highly measurable, undeniable delay in thinking and reaction time. That is the physical, biological root of that 10-second pause we talked about.
But because it's microscopic, no one can see it. You can't see the mental side streets under construction when you look at a survivor across a dinner table.
No, you can't. And what makes this so uniquely maddening for survivors is that very often their own doctors can't see it either.
Wait, really? What about brain scans?
Well, standard medical imaging, like your typical CT scans and MRIs, they are fantastic tools for finding large-scale catastrophic issues.
Like bleeding or something.
Right. They will clearly show a skull fracture, a pooling hemorrhage, or a large tumor. But they completely lack the resolution to see the microscopic tearing of individual axons.
You're kidding.
I'm not. The white matter damage is simply too diffuse and too small for a standard MRI to detect.
So a survivor could be experiencing this profound mental gridlock, struggling to form basic sentences, and a neurologist could look at their MRI and say, "Great news, your brain looks completely normal."
It happens every single day.
That is wild.
It requires highly advanced, specialized imaging, specifically something called diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI, to even begin to map this specific type of wiring damage.
Okay, diffusion tensor imaging, how does that work?
DTI is a fascinating technology. It actually tracks the directional flow of water molecules along the white matter tracks.
Oh, wow.
Right. In a healthy axon, water flows smoothly in one direction, like water in a pipe. If the pipe is shattered, the water disperses randomly. DTI algorithms can read that dispersion and map out exactly where the broken cables are.
That's incredible. So why don't they just use that for everyone?
Here's the catch. DTI is not standard practice in your average emergency room or local neurology clinic. It's largely used in research settings or like highly specialized concussion clinics.
So if you don't have access to top-tier specialized care, you are essentially flying blind.
Completely blind.
Imagine the psychological toll of that. You are living this agonizing daily reality of a slow brain. You are struggling to process basic conversations, your career is falling apart, and the medical establishment is handing you a piece of paper that says you are perfectly healthy.
It's devastating.
It's like telling someone with a compound fracture in their leg to just walk it off, because the x-ray machine was unplugged and didn't print out a picture of the broken bone. The physical reality of the damage doesn't cease to exist just because the camera couldn't capture it.
It is profoundly invalidating. And the compounding tragedy here is that navigating those damaged neural side streets doesn't just cost the survivor more time, it costs them an exorbitant amount of physiological energy.
Oh, okay.
This brings us to a massive, often ignored piece of the puzzle from McMillion's work, the energy crisis.
The energy crisis.
Yes, this is the bridge between the physical wiring damage and the intense, bone-deep exhaustion that really characterizes life after a brain injury.
Right, because if I'm driving my car on those side streets for an hour and a half, instead of cruising on the highway for 20 minutes, I'm burning significantly more gas. What happens to the brain's fuel tank?
Well, to understand the energy crisis, we have to look at how a healthy brain manages its metabolism. Even on a good day, learner, The human brain is a massive energy consumer.
Right, it takes a lot to keep the lights on.
Exactly. It makes up roughly 2% of our body weight, but it consumes about 20% of our daily energy in the form of glucose and oxygen.
20% for something that small.
Right. But an injured brain is entirely metabolically inefficient.
Because of the side streets.
Yes. Because it has to constantly reroute signals, fire extra neurons to bypass damage, and work around stripped myelin, it literally burns through its limited supply of glucose and oxygen at a highly accelerated rate.
So when a survivor says they are too tired to think, it's not a metaphor. It is a biological fact that their brain has depleted its physical fuel supply.
Precisely. And the crisis isn't just a lack of fuel, actually. It's also a buildup of metabolic waste.
Wait, waste? Like brain exhaust?
Kind of, yeah. When neurons fire, they release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. One of the primary excitatory neurotransmitters is glutamate.
Glutamate, got it.
You can think of glutamate as a chemical screaming, "Go!" to the next neuron. Now, in a healthy system, after the signal is sent, specialized support cells called astroglial cells act as a cleanup crew.
Okay, the cleanup crew.
They sweep in, clear the excess glutamate out of the synapse, and reset the system for the next signal.
Oh, I see where this is going. After an injury, the cleanup crew gets taken out.
Exactly. The trauma damages the astroglial cells. They fail to clear the excess glutamate. So now you have this chemical constantly screaming "go" in the brain.
Oh, man.
It overstimulates the healthy receptors. The brain is literally bathing in a toxic environment of its own neurochemicals, which further degrades communication efficiency and causes healthy cells to essentially exhaust themselves to death.
That sounds absolutely chaotic, and a huge part of that chaos, according to the sources, is the loss of the brain's internal filter.
Yes, the filter.
I really want to spend some time here, because understanding the frontal lobe seems critical to understanding why mundane tasks becomes so exhausting for a survivor.
The frontal lobe is the executive center of the brain. Sitting right behind your forehead, it manages our highest level functions: decision-making, emotional regulation, and crucially, something called inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control.
Right. A healthy frontal lobe acts as an automatic subconscious gatekeeper. Right now, learner, as you are listening to us speak, your brain is doing something miraculous. It is automatically filtering out the hum of your refrigerator, the feeling of the fabric of your shirt against your skin, maybe the distant sound of traffic outside your window.
You don't even notice it.
Exactly. You don't have to consciously command your brain to ignore those things. Your frontal lobe actively inhibits those sensory signals so your cognitive bandwidth can focus entirely on our voices.
It's basically the ultimate bouncer at the door of your attention.
That's a great analogy.
But when the frontal lobe takes a hit during that high-speed impact, the bouncer goes home.
Yes. When the frontal lobe is damaged, that automatic sensory filter breaks down. The medical term for this is spurious neuronal activation.
Spurious neuronal activation. Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
What that means is that too many parts of the brain are firing at the exact same time with zero regulation. Because the filter is gone, the brain attempts to process the hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of the shirt, the traffic outside, and the conversation, all with equal priority.
Oh my God. That sounds like a waking nightmare.
It's overwhelming.
It's like trying to have an intimate, complex conversation about your taxes while standing in the front row of a heavy metal concert.
Exactly.
The person next to you is trying to explain a deduction, and you're trying so intensely to hear them. But the noise of the crashing drums, the screaming guitars, the flashing strobe lights, it's all being processed at the exact same volume as their voice.
And you can't tune it out.
Right. The sheer raw mental effort it takes to parse out the words from the surrounding chaos is staggering.
And that level of concentrated effort is biologically unsustainable.
Of course it is.
The brain simply cannot maintain that output. Which brings us to a phenomenon the sources call the 3 p.m. wall.
The 3 p.m. wall. If you know anyone with a brain injury, or even chronic fatigue syndrome, this wall is a very, very real physical boundary.
Oh yeah. Here is how it typically manifests. A survivor might wake up after a full night's rest, have a quiet breakfast, and seem perfectly sharp at 10 in the morning.
Right.
They can hold a nuanced conversation, maybe check some emails, and their family members might look at them and think, oh great, they're back to normal, they're fully recovered.
Because the hardware is running okay for the moment.
Right. But by mid-afternoon, they hit an absolute impenetrable wall. The cognitive system literally crashes.
They just shut down.
They might go completely blank, they might start slurring their words, become intensely irritable, or literally find themselves unable to answer a simple yes or no question. And it is absolutely vital for the public to understand that this is not weakness.
It's not.
It is not the survivor being lazy or giving up because they are sad. It is the result of an astronomical metabolic workload catching up to them.
Right, because thinking with a TBI is literally the equivalent of running a marathon while everyone else around you is taking a leisurely stroll.
Exactly.
If we are walking and the survivor is sprinting just to keep pace with us, they can hold their own for the first mile, maybe two. But eventually their body, or in this case their neurological fuel supply, is going to completely deplete itself.
And this is where the picture gets even more complex.
Oh boy.
We have the physical highway damage, we have the broken filter letting in all the sensory noise, and we have the brain burning through its glucose at record speed. But the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right. It's attached to a body.
It is part of a body. What happens when other bodily systems are also damaged and demanding the brain's limited resources?
This was the part of the research that really reframed the whole issue for me. We're talking about hidden battery drains.
Hidden battery drains, yes.
Because if the brain is already operating at 110% capacity just to hold a normal conversation, it has zero reserve power. So any secondary background noise is going to absolutely devastate processing speed. Let's look at the two big ones: sleep and physical pain.
They are massive thieves of cognitive bandwidth.
Let's talk about sleep first.
The statistics on sleep following a TBI are incredibly sobering. Nearly 60% of traumatic brain injury survivors develop long-term chronic sleep difficulties.
60%, that's huge.
It is. And remember our discussion about metabolic waste.
The glutamate cleanup crew.
Exactly. The brain does its heavy repair work and flushes out those toxic neurochemicals during deep, slow-wave sleep. If the injury has disrupted the brain's circadian rhythm and you are constantly waking up or simply failing to enter those restorative sleep phases, you are starting your marathon the next day with a battery that only charged to 30%.
That sounds miserable. And then you combine that chronic, compounding sleep deprivation with chronic pain, which is, nearly ubiquitous among survivors.
Exactly.
Whether it's structural neck pain from the whiplash of the accident or intense frequent headaches from the cranial trauma itself.
Exactly. Pain acts like a blaring fire alarm constantly ringing in the background of the brain. The brain cannot ignore pain. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Right. Pain means danger.
Exactly. So the brain has to constantly expend precious metabolic energy processing that pain signal, trying to modulate it, trying to figure out if the body is in active danger. Every ounce of energy spent managing the pain is an ounce of energy stolen from cognitive thought.
It's all coming from the same tank.
It is.
But the hidden drain that truly astounded me when looking at the sources was the connection to vision. I had absolutely no idea how metabolically expensive it is just to see.
It is arguably the most complex thing the brain does.
Really?
Oh yes, vision consumes a staggering 44% of the brain's total resting energy.
Okay, I have to stop you. 44%. Just to see.
Just to see, let that sink in. Almost half of your brain's processing power is entirely dedicated to taking light that hits your retinas and turning it into a cohesive, three-dimensional, understandable map of the world.
That is mind-blowing.
Because seeing isn't just acting like a camera. The brain has to coordinate 6 tiny muscles around each eye to track moving objects. It has to constantly adjust the lens to maintain focus. It has to merge the slightly different image from the left eye and the right eye into one single, stable image so you don't see double.
Right, stereoscopic vision.
Exactly. It is a massive computational load. Now, a traumatic brain injury very frequently disrupts the neurological pathways that control those specific eye muscles.
So the eyes are no longer working together as a perfect team.
Correct. We call this visual inefficiency. The eyes might not track smoothly across a line of text, or they might struggle to converge on a single point when looking at something up close, like a phone screen.
So what does the brain do?
When that delicate coordination is broken, the brain doesn't just give up. It forces the system to work harder. The brain has to spend massive amounts of extra conscious energy fighting the muscles just to keep the room from spinning or to keep the words on a page from doubling.
Oh, wow.
If 44% of your brain's power is already taxed by normal vision, and now it requires 60 or 70% just to maintain a stable image of your living room, you have practically no bandwidth left over for cognitive tasks.
Like remembering a phone number. or tracking the logic of a conversation.
Exactly.
It makes complete, undeniable sense. I think of it exactly like a smartphone.
Go on.
We've all owned a phone that is like 3 or 4 years old,
Yeah.
and the lithium battery is physically degraded, right? It won't hold a charge like it used to.
Sure.
That degraded battery is the brain after the structural injury. Now imagine you turn that old phone on and you immediately open a dozen heavy, power-draining apps in the background.
Oh, it's going to struggle.
You've got GPS tracking your location, a heavy 3D video game rendering, a podcast streaming, Bluetooth searching for a connection. Those heavy background apps are the chronic pain, the poor sleep, the massive visual strain.
That is a very apt comparison.
So when you go to do something incredibly simple like just tapping the screen to open one plain text message, the entire system freezes up. The screen goes completely unresponsive, the phone gets physically hot to the touch, and you just have to wait.
The spinning wheel of death.
Right. No wonder the system freezes. It's entirely out of RAM. The text message isn't the problem. The background load is the problem.
And that smartphone analogy is actually a deeply empowering way to view the situation.
Really? How so?
Because it illuminates a path forward.
Hmm.
You might not be able to magically heal the microscopic white matter tearing in the frontal lobe, but you can actively close those heavy background apps.
Oh, I see.
By engaging in specialized vision therapy to retrain the eye muscles and improve visual efficiency, or utilizing targeted pain management strategies, or undergoing sleep studies to improve sleep hygiene, you are actively freeing up cognitive resources.
So by treating the secondary symptoms, you have the primary processing issue.
Exactly. When you close the background apps, the overall processing speed can actually improve because the brain suddenly has more bandwidth available for actual thinking.
That is a crucial pivot. There are levers we can pull to ease the burden on the system. But before we get deeper into adaptation, I want to make sure we ground all this heavy biology in the reality of a normal Tuesday for a survivor.
Very important.
We have a very clear picture of the physical damage, the side street routing, the energy crisis, and the battery drains. But what does that actually look like when you walk out the front door?
Right, in everyday life.
Yeah. The sources provided some incredibly vivid, relatable examples of the slow brain in action. Let's walk through these, because this is where the clinical science becomes deeply human.
A prime example, and one that causes immense social friction, is what the literature refers to as the social delayed feed.
Oh, this one breaks my heart a little bit. Imagine being at a lively dinner party. There are 4 or 5 friends around a table. The wine is flowing, people are talking quickly, bouncing ideas off each other, throwing out quick jokes.
A typical social setting.
Right. For a TBI survivor, sitting in that group dynamic can feel exactly like watching a movie where the audio track is totally out of sync with the video.
It's incredibly disorienting.
Someone tells a fast joke. The survivor's brain receives the audio, but it takes 5 or 10 seconds to route that audio through the side streets, process the context, understand the humor, and formulate the perfect, witty response.
But by the time they do,
But by the time the survivor opens their mouth to deliver the punchline, the group has already moved on to 3 entirely different topics.
it is absolutely critical to remember the core premise here. The survivor wasn't confused by the joke. They didn't lose their sense of humor or their social grace. The underlying intelligence is perfectly intact.
They just needed time.
Their brain simply needed those few extra seconds to navigate the damaged white matter to organize the output. But conversational timing is ruthless.
It is.
If you miss your window in a fast-paced group, you're left sitting in silence, holding a thought that is now irrelevant. Over time, the constant effort of trying to catch a moving train becomes so exhausting that survivors often just stop trying to contribute. They retreat inward, leading to profound social isolation.
And then there is the very physical manifestation of the broken filter, which I like to call the grocery store gridlock.
Yes. A grocery store is arguably one of the most hostile environments for an injured brain.
A hostile environment, really.
It is an absolute sensory nightmare. Think about the input. You have bright, humming, fluorescent lights overhead, the high-pitched squeak of shopping cart wheels on linoleum, the overhead speakers playing pop music.
Children crying in the next aisle.
Exactly. Hundreds of colorful, loudly designed boxes screaming for your visual attention on every single shelf. A healthy, intact frontal lobe acts as the bouncer, filtering all of that out so you can focus on one simple task: finding the oat milk.
But the injured brain doesn't have the bouncer.
Without that inhibitory control, the brain attempts to process every single input with equal, terrifying intensity. The visual noise of the cereal boxes is just as loud to the brain as the music, which is just as loud as the squeaking cart.
So what happens to the person?
The survivor might find themselves standing completely motionless in the center of the aisle, unable to move forward or backward. It becomes a total bottleneck of sensory overload.
And to an outside observer, it looks like they forgot what cereal they like.
Right, but they haven't forgotten anything. Their system is just catastrophically locked up, trying to process the visual and auditory data of an entire warehouse simultaneously.
Which leads right into the paralysis of the frozen question. This one happens in the quiet of a living room.
Yes, it doesn't always take a grocery store to freeze the system.
Someone simply asks, "Hey, what do you want for dinner tonight?" And the survivor's brain just goes completely blank.
Total gridlock.
The answer's in there. They know they want pizza. But the brain is grinding so hard, spinning its tires in the mud, trying to retrieve the word pizza and push it out of the mouth, that they just freeze.
And the spouse or friend asking the question might sigh or roll their eyes, assuming they are being ignored.
Or worse, that the survivor is acting like a child who can't decide on a meal. It creates terrible relational friction.
And that grinding effort isn't limited to verbal communication, actually. It extends deeply into physical, everyday tasks. Consider the manual morning routine.
Right. Tasks that used to be fully, blissfully automatic. You don't consciously think about how to button a dress shirt, right?
No, your hands just do it.
You just let muscle memory take over while your brain plans out the agenda for your 10 a.m. meeting? But for slow brain, that deeply ingrained procedural memory pathway might be severed or compromised by the slow connection.
So now they have to manually, consciously sequence every single micro step of the process.
Look at the fabric. Pick up the fabric. Locate the plastic button with the right hand. Locate the hole with the left hand. Push the button through. Adjust.
It requires intense, active concentration for a task that used to require absolutely zero cognitive load.
Which again burns up the battery.
Exactly. This transition from automatic to manual processing also becomes a highly significant safety issue, particularly when we talk about driving and the yellow light dilemma.
The yellow light dilemma. I found this part terrifying.
Driving a vehicle requires constant, rapid-fire, split-second decision-making. As you approach an intersection, a traffic light turns yellow. A healthy brain instantly and subconsciously calculates the speed of the vehicle, the distance to the intersection, the road conditions, and the braking capability of the car.
It happens in milliseconds.
A slow brain experiences a massive lag in that exact calculation. They clearly see the yellow light, but the processing delay makes it incredibly difficult to decide whether to slam on the brakes or proceed through the intersection safely.
That is so dangerous.
It exposes the processing lag in a way that can be physically dangerous, which is precisely why comprehensive professional driving evaluations are so critical before a survivor gets back behind the wheel.
It's basically the ultimate test of processing speed. And we see similar, though less life-threatening, breakdowns in the workplace or the classroom with the instructions backlog.
Oh, the backlog is a major issue.
If a boss walks by your desk and drops 3 quick instructions, grab the Peterson file, email the client for an update, and meet me in the conference room in 5 minutes.
A healthy brain caches all 3 instructions in short-term memory instantly.
Right. A slow brain might only capture the very first phrase, grab the Peterson file. Because by the time the brain is actively processing the concept of the file, the audio of the other 2 instructions has completely flown by, entirely unrecorded.
It's not that the survivor forgot to email the client. It's that the instruction never successfully made it into the system in the first place. It was a processing backlog.
The reading loop operates on the exact same principle, doesn't it?
It does. A survivor might sit down with a book and read an entire paragraph. Their eyes are physically scanning every single word, cracking perfectly from left to right, and they reach the bottom of the page.
But they realize their brain hasn't actually downloaded the meaning of the sentences yet.
Exactly. The physical, visual intake speed of reading the words has entirely outpaced the internal cognitive processing speed. So they have to go back and read the exact same paragraph 3 or 4 times, intentionally slowing their eyes down, just to grasp the narrative meaning.
Okay, here is where I want to introduce some serious skepticism, or at least play devil's advocate for a moment, because this next part of the source material genuinely threw me.
Okay, what is it?
The concept of false memories.
Ah, yes, confabulation.
Wait, I'm struggling with this part. If their core intelligence is still there, and their long-term memory is fundamentally intact, why does the injured brain suddenly start making things up?
That's a very common question.
If I forget a meeting, I just say, oh man, I totally forgot. But the sources note that the injured brain actually tries to actively fill in the gaps with untrue information. From the outside, that doesn't look like a processing delay. That just looks like lying.
It does look like that, yes.
If you ask a survivor what they did yesterday, and they tell you a detailed story about going to the park, when they actually stayed home all day, why did they do that?
This is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and relationally destructive elements of a brain injury. It is such a critical point. To address your skepticism directly, no, it is absolutely not intentional lying and it is not manipulation.
Okay, so what is it?
What you are describing is a well-documented neurological error known as confabulation. When the brain experiences structural gaps in its memory, encoding particularly in short-term memory, which is highly vulnerable to TBI, whereas deeply encoded long-term memories remain stable, it creates a terrifying void.
A void, like an empty space.
Yes, and the human brain fundamentally hates a vacuum. It is a meaning-making machine. It desperately wants to construct a logical narrative of the world to keep you safe.
Okay.
So when it reaches into the filing cabinet for the memory of yesterday and finds an empty folder, the subconscious brain panics. Working with an incomplete data set, it subconsciously stitches together fragments of old memories, pieces of dreams, or highly logical guesses to fill the hole, and it presents that stitched-together narrative to the conscious mind as a factual memory.
Let me make sure I understand this. You're saying they genuinely, in their heart of hearts, believe the untrue story they are telling.
Yes, they are experiencing that stitched-together confabulation as absolute reality. The survivor is not consciously trying to deceive anyone. Their damaged memory network has simply handed them a faulty script, and they are reading it as truth.
Wow.
Getting angry at them, accusing them of lying, or aggressively confronting them with the truth is often counterproductive and deeply confusing for them because their internal reality does not match your external reality.
Because it's a structural error.
Exactly. It is a direct biological symptom of the processing and memory network damage. It is not a character flaw or moral failing.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It completely changes the reaction from, how dare you lie to me, to, okay, your neurological filing system is misfiring right now.
It requires a lot of grace from the people around them.
Definitely. Now, knowing how incredibly exhausting all of this is, the sensory gridlock, the battery drains, the confabulation, I want to deliberately pivot our conversation toward hope.
Let's do it.
Because, learner, we can't just leave you stranded in the grocery store aisle. We have to talk about practical adaptation and how the human brain actually manages to survive and navigate this reality.
And we absolutely should, because the science of adaptation is deeply hopeful. The most important conceptual shift to grasp here is that recovery from a severe TBI isn't always about becoming faster.
Right.
It isn't about magically paving over the broken highway and going back to the way things were before the impact. True recovery is often about learning to work masterfully with the brain you have today.
I love that.
And the biological cornerstone of that hope is a concept called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity is essentially the brain's superpower, right? It's the ability to rewire.
It is arguably the most miraculous feature of human biology. Neuroplasticity is the brain's dynamic, ongoing ability to physically rewire itself.
So it can build new roads.
Exactly. While some stretched axons might heal over time, much of the functional recovery comes from the brain literally establishing entirely new synaptic connections and pathways through healthy, undamaged tissue to permanently bypass the dead zones.
That is incredible.
The brain is not a static, unchangeable organ like a liver or a kidney. It is highly dynamic, constantly molding its own physical architecture based on experience and demand.
But imagine it doesn't just happen on its own while you sit on the couch watching TV.
No, unfortunately not. It requires highly deliberate, focused practice, often in a structured rehabilitation environment. It's very akin to physical therapy for a torn muscle or a shattered bone.
Right, you have to work it.
You have to actively, repeatedly challenge the brain to fire in new ways, to encourage those new architectural connections to form and solidify over months and years.
It's the GPS analogy.
The GPS analogy.
Yeah. If my usual fastest route home from work is permanently blocked because a bridge collapsed, my car's GPS is going to freak out from it. It will spin and say, recalculating.
Oh,
But eventually, it will analyze the map and calculate a new best route using back roads. Now, that new route might take longer to calculate the first few times I drive it, and the physical drive itself might permanently be 10 minutes longer than the old highway route. But the fundamental point is, it still gets me home.
the destination is successfully reached.
Yes, that is adaptation. It's not giving up on going home, it's finding the new route.
That is a beautiful way to frame neuroplasticity. And while the brain is engaging in that slow, long-term architectural rewiring, there are highly practical, immediate tools that survivors can deploy to manage their days.
Let's hear them.
The sources highlight a specific clinical strategy called time pressure management, or TPM.
Let's really dig into TPM because this feels like a highly actionable, tangible tool for anyone dealing with cognitive fatigue. How does it work?
Time pressure management is a structured behavioral strategy that teaches survivors to anticipate stress, cognitive overload, and time constraints long before they actually happen.
So it's proactive.
Very proactive. Instead of blindly walking into a loud environment and waiting to hit the 3 p.m. wall, or waiting until they become completely paralyzed by sensory overload in a crowd, TPM is about proactive defensive planning. It involves teaching survivors to actively build structural buffers into their daily schedule.
So it's about not packing the schedule. Like intentionally scheduling a mandatory 45-minute block of silence in a dark room between a doctor's appointment and a family dinner, knowing your brain needs physical time to cool down and clear out the metabolic waste.
Exactly. You treat rest not as a luxury, but as a medical necessity. TPM also involves the micromanagement of tasks, breaking massive projects down into tiny, manageable chunks.
Right.
If the concept of cleaning the house creates too much sensory and executive processing load causing paralysis, you break it down to the absolute minimum. I will not clean the house today. I will only wipe down the left side of the kitchen counter. That is the only task.
That makes it so much more achievable.
Furthermore, TPM involves creating explicit emergency exit plans before hitting a breaking point. For example, a survivor might establish a subtle hand signal with their spouse at a crowded family gathering.
Like a safe word, basically.
Kind of. When the survivor taps their watch twice, it means my frontal filter is breaking, the noise is becoming toxic, and we need to leave this room in the next 3 minutes before a catastrophic emotional meltdown occurs. It puts the locus of control firmly back in the survivor's hands.
That level of intentionality is incredible. The sources also cautiously wade into the waters of pharmacotherapy, using medication to assist processing speed.
Yes, they do.
I want to be very careful here, as we are not doctors prescribing anything. But what does the actual clinical research say about using chemical support to help the slow brain?
The current literature indicates that while behavioral adaptations like time pressure management and environmental controls are the primary pillars of management, there are pharmacological options that may provide a critical assist for some specific individuals.
Okay, what kind of options?
Specifically, the McMillion sources mention meta-analyses looking at stimulant medications like methylphenidate, which the public commonly knows as Ritalin.
Which is traditionally prescribed for ADHD to help with focus and hyperactivity, right?
Correct. The mechanism of action for methylphenidate involves blocking the reuptake of specific neurotransmitters, primarily dopamine and norepinephrine, keeping more of those chemicals active and available in the brain's synapses.
Okay, so more chemicals floating around to help.
Right. For some, but certainly not all, TBI patients, increasing that dopamine availability can have a small but statistically significant positive effect on raw information processing speed and baseline cognitive arousal.
So it's basically a chemical lubricant.
That's a good way to look at it. It helps fine-tune the brain's neurochemistry to improve the efficiency of the signals traveling down those side streets, and perhaps provides artificial support for that broken frontal lobe filter.
But it's not a cure.
No. It is absolutely not a magic cure, it doesn't fix the torn axons, and it comes with side effects that don't work for everyone. But it is a legitimate tool in the neurological toolkit that specialists might explore to give the struggling brain a slight edge in metabolic efficiency.
I think having tools is what matters. Because another massive hurdle for adaptation, maybe the most frustrating one, is simply getting the world to believe you.
Oh, the invisible disability aspect.
We've talked extensively about how this is invisible. If you go to your HR department or your boss and say, I need 20% more time to complete these reports because my brain processes information slower now, and you look perfectly physically healthy standing there in a suit, they might consciously or subconsciously just think you're lazy or trying to game the system.
It's a very common experience.
How does a survivor objectively prove the invisible?
This is precisely where standardized neuropsychological testing becomes not just helpful, but legally and professionally vital. A survivor needs hard, objective, quantifiable data to prove the processing bottleneck exists, particularly for skeptical employers, disability boards, or insurance companies.
What do those tests look like?
The sources highlight 2 specific, widely used clinical tests designed to expose this lag. First is the Symbol Digit Modalities Test, or the SDMT.
How does the SCMT work?
It is deceptively simple, but incredibly revealing. It is a rapid, strictly timed 90-second test where the patient is given a reference key that pairs specific numbers with abstract geometric shapes.
Okay.
They then have to look at a page of randomized shapes and verbally, or in writing, match the correct number to the shape as fast as humanly possible.
That sounds stressful.
It is. Because it requires integrating visual scanning, working memory, and physical or verbal output under intense time pressure, it is highly sensitive to the exact kind of diffuse white matter wiring damage we've been discussing. It objectively, undeniably measures that processing lag against a baseline of healthy peers.
So it's basically a 90-second stress test to clock the literal speedometer of the brain.
Yes, exactly. And the second critical assessment is the trail-making test, or TMT, specifically Part B of the test.
What happens in Part B?
The patient has to draw a line connecting a scattered array of circles, alternating between sequential numbers and sequential letters. So they draw a line from 1 to A, then A to 2, then 2 to B, and so on.
So you have to constantly switch between two different rule sets.
Exactly. This test specifically identifies bottlenecks where a person's speed is crippled by the executive mental effort of rapidly switching task rules. It beautifully highlights deficits in cognitive flexibility and complex processing speed.
So it catches the lag.
Yes. By enduring these rigorous tests, a survivor gets a professional, undeniable speedometer reading of their brain's hardware limits. They can take that thick clinical report to an HR department and say, I am not lazy. Functionally, I require these specific, legally protected workplace accommodations like written instructions instead of verbal, or extended deadlines, and here is the objective, peer-reviewed medical data proving exactly why.
Which is unbelievably empowering. It completely takes the conversation out of the subjective realm of I feel slow and tired and firmly plants it into the objective realm of my SDMT scores demonstrate a severely impaired processing delay in the 5th percentile.
It's hard data.
It forces the world to accommodate the biology.
Yeah.
But adaptation isn't a solo sport. It isn't just on the survivor to manage their time and take tests.
Yeah.
The survivor isn't navigating this world alone. They're deeply embedded in a family, a friend group, a workplace.
Right, the social ecosystem.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most vital major piece of this deep dive, the social ecosystem. Because the reality is, the people around the survivor have to actively adjust their own speed limits to accommodate the brain's new GPS route.
I would argue this is perhaps the most crucial takeaway for anyone listening. For you, learner, if you love, work with, or interact with someone who has sustained a TBI, you have to consciously adopt what the literature calls the new speed limit.
The new speed limit.
You fundamentally cannot force a traumatized, slow brain to process at your healthy highway speeds. Trying to do so will simply crash their system and induce a wall of fatigue.
So let's get deeply practical. What does adopting the new speed limit actually look like in a living room or a boardroom?
It requires a conscious, ongoing modulation of your own behavior.
Right.
First, you must physically speak more slowly. Not in a demeaning, condescending, baby talk manner, but simply at a more measured, deliberate pace. You must consciously address one single topic at a time. No rapid-fire lists, no jumping between 5 different concepts in 3 sentences. You need to actively limit group conversations or step in to help moderate them so the survivor isn't left 10 seconds behind the flow of banter.
And time.
Yes, above all else, you have to give them the ultimate gift, time. You must give them time to answer, time to formulate a thought, time to physically finish a sentence without you impatiently jumping in to finish it for them, time to fully process what was just said before you move on to the next point.
And this is where we have to fiercely reevaluate our own biases. Because I think well-meaning people worry that if they slow down their speech, or if they wait 10 seconds for an answer, they are treating the adult survivor like a child. We fear that giving someone time is somehow lowering our expectations of their core intelligence.
It is the exact polar opposite. Patience is the ultimate form of respect.
I love that.
Patience is recognizing that different physical brains operate at different mechanical speeds. You are deeply respecting their intellect by giving their compromised hardware the necessary time to run their brilliant software.
Wow.
When you interrupt them, when you finish their sentences to save time, or when you rush them to an answer, you are essentially pulling the dial-up cord out of the wall halfway through the download. You have to respect them enough to let the download finish.
That is beautifully said. There is also a very dark very difficult reality regarding the social ecosystem that the sources don't shy away from.
Yeah.
Personality changes.
Yes, this is tough.
The Tragic Brain Writing series points out that partners often report feeling profound grief, stating they feel like they are married to a complete stranger after a severe TBI.
This is arguably the most deeply painful aspect for families to navigate. It is absolutely essential for spouses, parents, and children to understand that radical personality shifts, sudden irrational fears, a startling lack of empathy, a shortened temper, or wild emotional volatility are very often rooted in physical tissue damage, particularly, again, to the frontal lobes.
Because it's the executive center.
Exactly. It doesn't just manage sensory input, it manages our personality, our social grace, and our emotional regulation. When it is physically scarred, the person's emotional filter is broken, just like their sensory filter. They might say inappropriate things or fly into a rage because the neurological brakes have been cut.
But they aren't choosing to do that.
No. These changes are a direct biological symptom of structural damage. It is rarely a conscious psychological choice by the survivor to be difficult, mean, or different.
Which naturally brings us to the toll this takes on the caregiver. We simply cannot talk about the social ecosystem without shining a massive light on the people providing the day-to-day scaffolding.
The clinical statistics regarding caregivers are terrifyingly sobering. Providing constant, unwavering support to a survivor, constantly adjusting your own speed limit, meticulously managing their sensory environment, absorbing the brunt of their personality changes, and mourning the person they used to be is incredibly systemically draining.
What are the numbers?
The sources indicate that between 40% and 70% of family caregivers experience clinical, diagnosable depression.
Up to 70%. That is a staggering majority. It means depression isn't the exception for caregivers. It is the statistical norm.
It is the norm, and the message to those families must be unequivocal. You fundamentally cannot support a slow brain if your own battery is completely dead.
Put your own oxygen mask on first.
Exactly. The caregiver must ruthlessly prioritize their own rest, their own mental health therapy, and aggressively seek out external social support. Caregiver burnout is not an individual failing, it is a systemic failure of the whole unit. If the caregiver goes down, the entire cognitive scaffolding that the survivor relies on collapses with them.
Okay, learner. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've gone deep into the brain hole. If you are listening to this, and you or someone you love is dealing with the invisible reality of a traumatic brain injury, here is the synthesis of everything we've unpacked over this deep dive.
It's all about the hardware.
It is. Processing speed is just the highway. It is not the destination. The core intelligence, the wit, the humor, the essence of the person you know, they are still in there, fully intact. The injured brain is just working incredibly, exhaustingly hard.
Right.
It is actively trying to overcome microscopic damage to its white matter cabling. It is operating on severely drained physiological batteries, and it is fighting through intense, chaotic sensory overload every single minute, just to perform tasks that the rest of us take for granted.
And that profound daily effort to adapt and survive in a fast-paced world is something to be deeply respected, not pitied, and certainly never judged.
Absolutely. So we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We started this hour by asking you to imagine the panic of an agonizing 10-second delay when you know the exact answer to a question.
The 10-second pause.
Right. The next time you are interacting with someone, whether it's a colleague at work, a family member across the dinner table, or a complete stranger in the grocery store aisle, and they take a long, uncomfortable pause before answering you, we want you to pause your own assumptions.
D. McMillion's reflection poses this perfectly, and it is a question we should all carry with us. Before judging someone for taking longer to answer, ask yourself, are they thinking more slowly, or is their brain simply working harder than I can see?
Something for all of us to seriously mull over the next time we find ourselves tapping our foot, impatiently waiting for an answer. Learner, thank you for requesting this exploration. Protect your peace, protect your brain, and we will catch you on the next one.